Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and an ongoing study in the Gospel of Mark. We only have this lesson and one more lesson to finish up chapter 14, so we're going to look at 14, 53 to 65. But when we begin, we're going to begin in block 3 this time. If you go to block 3, we're going to do a little bit of a refresher here. And if you take a look at the top line, Phronesis ta tu theou, keep the things of God in mind. And that's from a previous lesson, Mark 8:33. And the key word is phronesis. We're supposed to keep the things of God in mind. Well, how did Ross teach us to do that? By maintaining a biblical worldview, you will keep the things of God in mind. And then the verse that actually uses noesis, Mark 13:14, let him that readeth understand spiritually. And Christ uses noeo, the concept for spiritual perception. So whether you want to concentrate on noesis or phronesis, the truth is we keep the things of God in mind when we work continually on maintaining a biblical worldview. And that is our task. Now, in this lesson, as was the case in the last lesson, right now we're dealing with opposition. The last lesson was on the arrest narrative. Now we have the mock trial before the Sanhedrin in this lesson. But it's all about the realm of spirit that is a realm where there exists opposition. When we choose to participate in the realm of spirit, we find ourselves tensioned in opposition. We find ourselves needing to bear a cross, because the realm of spirit is a realm of spirit always in opposition, always opposing the status quo, always opposing sensate surface reality with a parallel spiritual reality. So this lesson again is going to deal with opposition. But this time we look at the mock trial by the Sanhedrin. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the text. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. But they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements didn't even agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy the temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands. Yet even their testimony did not agree. When the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is the testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? Said Jesus. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? You have heard this blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. So there you have the mock trial. Everything about this trial is illegal. And we'll get into that in the commentary, but every bit of it is illegal with regard to Jewish law. So it's a mock trial. But we need to look at the commentary now by Ruckman, by Edwards, and we are going to look at Hegel because of the little refresher we had in Block 3 there. So let's go to Block 2 and take a look at the commentary. Okay, we're going to begin with Ruckman. The council of the Sanhedrin in verse 55 stands in opposition to the living Word of God. That's who Christ is, the living Word of God. They reject Christ and they pervert the truth. And they seek to reach their predetermined verdict. They have no credible witnesses. This is persecution by the religious leadership. Edwards. Every detail of this trial violates Jewish rule. And the Sanhedrin resorts to false testimony, attempts to discredit Christ, do characterize every generation, even our own. Our own generation has many people in secular society who try to discredit Christ. We have, unfortunately, a scholar, Bart Ehrman, who went to Princeton Theological Seminary and studied biblical textual criticism, and he, whenever he teaches online, he always discredits Christ, and he has come out and actually confessed that he is not a Christian, he is an agnostic. And I always get disturbed when I see that, because Bart Ehrman began as a believer. Now he is an agnostic, and worse yet, he teaches his agnostic position. That's very disturbing to me. The main charge is that Christ claims to destroy the temple and then rebuild it. And the temple is the symbol of the Judaic essence of life and the hopes for the Judaic kingdom. So very, very powerful. Both Ruckman and Edwards both agree that this is a mock trial. It is illegal in every respect. There's no agreed upon testimony, and it's basically a predetermined verdict that they want to rush into in order to condemn Christ to death, to capital punishment. Now, while remembering what we took a look at in Block 3, we're going to look at Hegel now in Block 2 and 4 additional aspects of noesis when we find ourselves in opposition. We find ourselves in opposition. So let's take a look at this. Block 2, Note 3. The equilibrium of the realm of spirit consists of resting in an alienation of opposites, coupled with our own anticipation of pure consciousness of faith in the beyond of spirit. So yes, there is two opposing realities. There is surface reality that is secular and distorts the truth, and then alongside it runs the realm of spirit that is the genuine true, and those two exist in tension at all times. However, as believers, we have faith in the beyond of spirit that will come to fruition, that will be fulfilled, and we hold on to that by faith, says Hegel. We have faith in the beyond of spirit ahead of us, which is striving toward the doxa glory of God. And Hegel calls this pure consciousness. He calls it pure consciousness. Faith is termed by Hegel pure consciousness. And he says the world of spirit breaks up into the reality of this self-alienation, where the sensate world is in opposition to the spiritual world. The spiritual reality exists as pure consciousness. And the spirit raises up itself through faith, through our participatory faith. Now I put at the bottom here, I put the larger macrocosmic triad for Hegel that he brings up, because it's kind of interesting. Hegel does have all of his truth is in triads, but he does have a triad with regard to the larger overall picture. It is enlightenment as thesis, romanticism as antithesis, and absolute idealism as synthesis. Now for the Enlightenment, they prioritized reason, the cunning of reason. Reason is dominant in the Enlightenment. Then along comes Romanticism and says, look, you're putting too much emphasis on reason, and reason is not the only truth. There is such a thing as numinous consciousness. There is such a thing as spiritual consciousness, and reason must be corrected by and coupled with spiritual consciousness. And then Hegel says that his absolute idealism brings those two together dialectically in his system of noesis, spiritual comprehension, spiritual self-consciousness. And that's what Hegel was all about. Hegel was writing a theology of spiritual self-consciousness. How do we reach spiritual self-consciousness? How do we reach that goal which Hegel called the goal of absolute spirit, where we express that absolute spirit in aesthetics, through religion, and through even philosophy itself? But we always try to make it concrete. We try to express our experience of spiritual self-consciousness in art, in religion, or in philosophy itself. But that's his big picture. His big overall triad is always enlightenment, romanticism, absolute idealism. So I put that in there for you as a kind of reminder. And then back to block 3. Here's our reminder. You know, we're getting toward the end of the Gospel of Mark. And remember, that's why I have this block 3 in here. The entire second half of the Gospel of Mark is all about Christ trying to teach the disciples to think and meditate in a spiritual way. He rebuked Simon Peter for not thinking in a spiritual way. And that rebuke was in Mark 8:33, where Jesus says, you do not keep the things of God in mind. So the reverse of that is Christ wants us to keep the things of God in mind, because when he rebuked Simon Peter, he says, you do not keep the things of God in mind. If you look at block 3, then note 1, in Mark 8:33 it says, uk phronesis, not in mind. It's the rebuke verse. Christ tells Simon Peter, you do not keep the things of God in mind. Well, what does that mean in a positive way? We, along with the disciples and ourselves as disciples, we are to keep the things of God in mind. We are to seek phronesis, spiritual mindedness. We are to seek phronesis, spiritual mindedness. Ross taught us a whole series of sermons on how to do that, and that is build up and maintain a biblical worldview And if you build up and maintain a biblical worldview, you will be imprinting it again, and again in your heart. You will be revising it multiple times, but you'll call it up again, and again. And in neurophysiology, whenever you fire a chain of neurons over and over again, they will hardwire together. I have mentally constructed a spiritual worldview informed primarily by Jürgen Moltmann. I studied him all of my adult life, a very conservative German theologian. But I have fired that spiritual worldview so many times that my brain formed a neuron chain, and it is fired so many times, it's a hard-wired neuron chain with collateral axons that when any one of those collateral axons fires, it becomes an entrance node that triggers the whole neuron chain. So like the word hope, when I hear the word hope, it'll automatically trigger that collateral axon of hope, and it'll charge, run down to the hardwired neuron chain of my worldview, and it'll fire it. And I have many collateral axons in my brain that are linked to that spiritual worldview that I have worked on all of my adult theological life. And I learned a great deal of it from not just Jürgen Moltmann's books, but Jürgen Moltmann became a very close personal friend of me. He became, and he remains, and will always be a very close personal friend of mine. And we've exchanged many letters. We've exchanged many gifts in the mail. He will send me his books with little letters in them, or a dedication or something written in it. And I've sent him many of my photographs, because one of the things I used to do when I wasn't paralyzed was serious fine art photography, and Moltmann loves that. So I actually sent him some of my photographs. One that he really loves, he's got it in his study, is I did a photograph of Bryce Canyon, and I called it the Sanctuary, because it is a natural spiritual place. And he loved it. He loved that photograph that I did of Bryce Canyon. It was published in Europe, but of course, he never saw that. But I sent him a large framed photograph of that Bryce Canyon photo, and he put that into his study. But we've exchanged gifts over the years, and a lot of my worldview comes from our personal friendship that I've had with Moltmann, not just his books. Of course, his books have made a huge impact on my life. They certainly have. But it's been a combination of things. That's going to wrap up our lesson on 14:53 through 65. One more chapter 14 lesson. 14:66 to 72 on the denials by Simon Peter. Next lesson we will conclude chapter 14.